From exploding testicles to a tiny, insignificant organ that can kill you. And let's not forget squeezing a whole human through a space the size of a bagel. It's like evolution was pulling an all-nighter and skipped the final review. And yeah, we've got some notes. On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we're revealing the biggest design flaws in the human body. Number 10. You're probably too young to appreciate this serious design flaw, but if you're a male, don't worry. This ticking time bomb between your legs is waiting to explode, and it's gonna cause you years of pain. The urethra is a very thin tube that leads from the bladder to the tip of the penis, and it is how you pass urine. It's got a pretty important job, and because nature values efficiency, it takes the most direct route to its destination. And this is a problem. Why? Well, because it's all about traffic logistics. See, the urethra goes right through the middle of the prostate gland. And if you don't see a problem, let us explain. The prostate's job is to nourish and protect your swimmers, keeping sperm alive and healthy so they can do what evolution designed them to do. As you age, the prostate enters two different stages of growth. The first is during puberty and in response to hormones telling your body that it's time to fulfill your evolutionary duty. An enlarged prostate helps make space for the millions of sperm that your body is about to start producing. But sometime around your mid-20s, the prostate decides to start growing again, and doctors don't really know why. This becomes a problem for your urethra, which passes right through it, and that is when the pain hits. And for many aging men, it's all too familiar. A sharp burning sensation caused by urine starting to flow, and then getting stuck. Pressure builds, trapped in the urethra, backing up like a blocked pipe. And the question is, why does the urethra have to pass through the prostate? Why not go around it? Nobody really knows, but rerouting that path would instantly fix the next problem. Number 9. Pee and poop. One comes out the front and the other comes out the back. But why? Wouldn't it make more sense for both liquid and solid waste to come out of the same exit? If you've ever had a very hard, dry poop, you probably wish there was some liquid in there to push it along. Well, the answer comes down to our unique biology. Reptiles and birds use cloacas, which handle both lemonade and chocolate, for a delicious slurry. Humans went another route. The human waste processing system is made up of two parts, the digestive system and the kidneys. Both perform different duties, resulting in different waste byproducts. The digestive system tends to produce solid waste because it's handling food, which sits in your intestines long enough to give you a chance to absorb maximum nutrients out of it. The kidneys, meanwhile, filter our blood, and thus urine is made up almost entirely of waste from your bloodstream. However, they also expel excess water. Birds and reptiles also do this, though, and they retain one exit hole. So what's the deal? Well, it all comes down to how we handle nitrogen waste. Humans remove nitrogenous metabolic wastes primarily in the form of urea, which is so toxic it needs a lot of water to flush. Animals with a cloaca convert all of their waste into uric acid instead, which is less toxic and it needs less water to flush. This isn't by any accident, as you'll primarily find animals with this trait live in very dry environments where water conservation is paramount. Sure, it might be nice if humans had learned to pee out their butts, but this would probably make things a whole lot messier too. What is undeniable, though, is that there would be a lot less health hazards to worry about. If you ever experience a malfunction with this next design flaw, it's going to be one of the most painful things you have ever experienced, and it could kill you. Number 8. The appendix is a little worm-shaped structure located at the junction between the large and small intestines, and today it's believed to be largely vestigial. The belief comes from the history of appendix removal. For decades, doctors noticed no obvious negative effects in patients who had it removed, assuming, of course, they survived the surgery back when hand washing wasn't exactly a medical priority. However, more recent research dating back to 2007 hints that the appendix might actually serve as a reservoir for healthy gut bacteria. In some cases of serious illness wiping out your gut flora, the appendix is ready to go with a protected sample of the bacteria that you need to aid you in digestion, kind of like a tiny little worm-shaped Noah's Ark, which can get very angry. For some reason, the appendix can suddenly decide that it is sick of its current working conditions and it wants to move on to greener pastures. And this is indicated by a sudden inflammation of the appendix, which can feel like a dull pain in the abdomen that is difficult to pinpoint. However, as the appendix continues to inflame, the pain becomes more severe and localized, and there is no option but to remove it. Failing to act in time can cause the appendix to burst like an overfilled balloon, spraying bacteria all over your abdominal cavity. These microbes are harmless inside the intestines, but once they're loose in the rest of your body, things get dangerous fast. Without treatment, an appendix that bursts can very often lead to shock and then death. The fact is, there is more efficient ways to do some of the proposed jobs of the appendix. Whether it's keeping a selection of healthy gut flora alive or helping your immune system fight off infection, the location of the appendix doesn't help matters, as it's in a position that is prone to blockage. Sometimes it can happen from hardened stool, especially if you're dehydrated. Other times it's parasites like worms blocking the entrance to the appendix. Swallow something weird and it too can become lodged temporarily, causing swelling. Other times, the appendix decides to swell with seemingly no cause, guaranteeing you an emergency trip to the hospital and, in all probability, surgery. Whatever the appendix actually does for us, if we had one note to give it, would be location, location, location. Maybe such a tiny but important structure shouldn't be located somewhere prone to blockages. Next, we're going to go back to the reproductive organs because, boy oh boy, do we have notes on the reproductive organs. Number 7. Forbidden peaches, the old punching bags, the kiwi twins, your wrinkly coin purse. When it comes down to it, testicles are probably one of the biggest design flaws of the entire human body. Now, in a way, it makes sense. Sperm have one job, to create life, and to do so, they have to run the gauntlet that is the female reproductive system. To navigate this death race-inspired obstacle course, sperm have to be tough and strong, and they are when you consider just how capable individual sperm really are. But they are also surprisingly delicate, which is why your punching bags dangle outside of your body and in between your legs. Sperm requires a very precise range of temperature to survive, and anything outside of that range will start to kill them off. This is why evolution decided that the best thing to do was simply move the sperm storage tanks off-site, directly outside of your body. Technically, your sperm inhabit a luxury condo built just for them, where temperature can be carefully regulated. It's why your testicles can expand and contract in different environments. Jump into a cold shower and you'll notice them contract. But get into that hot tub and they'll start to expand. This is all to regulate heat and blood flow, ensuring that your boys are kept at an optimal temperature. But being located outside of the body comes with its own hazards, and we're going to tell you about real-life incidents in gruesome detail so you feel bad too. In 2017, a woman in Edinburgh, Scotland, bit off a man's testicles during a heated argument. Yes, with her teeth. The details are murky, and we have more questions than answers. But the result? She was ordered to pay £500 in compensation. A woman in Canada known as Jill the Ripper got into a fight with her partner, grabbed his nuggets, and ripped them clean off with one sharp tug. In 1976, Chicago Bears cornerback Virgil Livers was blocking a punt return that turned into a dog pile. A member of the opposite team attempted to jump the pile but instead came down knee first, directly into Livers' groin. The impact of a 250-pound NFL player coming down knee first on his groin caused one of his testicles to explode like an overripe tomato. Incredibly, Livers kept playing until his groin swelled so much it started affecting his ability to walk, which is surprising. You would think that walking would already be tough after having the kind of metaphorical balls it takes to keep playing defense with one of your real ones exploding. It's pretty clear that when it comes to design, the choice of placing the most evolutionary important organ outside of the body may not have been the best. Number 6. If you have witnessed a birth, you know it's equal parts miraculous, horrifying, and extremely messy. There's nothing quite as awe-inspiring as watching a loved one poop themselves while a tiny human claws its way out of an opening that seems way too small. Like a lost xenomorph chestburster that didn't ask for directions. It really is a miracle. It's also stupid dangerous. Let's talk about humans and pregnancy. On average, a baby takes 9 months to form and be born. In fact, we have the longest gestation period of all mammals, save for elephants, whales, and rhinos. But when a baby elephant, rhino, or whale is born, it's already up and moving within minutes. And this is why they take so long to bake. They live in a dangerous world and they need to be developed enough to run or swim shortly after birth. If you have ever encountered a human baby, you'll know they're pretty useless. When it comes to defenseless offspring, humans rank somewhere up near the top of the list, which begs the question, why in the world do babies take so long to cook? It all comes down to our big brains. Humans made a deal with the evolutionary devil. In exchange for high intelligence, our babies would give up the ability to be even remotely useful for the first few years of their life. And all of that intelligence is cram-packed in the head, which needs to then fit through an extraordinarily narrow exit route. This is a problem. The average birth canal is only about 2.5 inches wide. Meanwhile, the baby's head starts at around 4.5 to 5 inches. If you passed basic math, you can start to see the issue here. The shoulders are a whole lot wider. and it's all gotta exit through the same 2.5-inch wide opening. The problem that human biology had to contend with is that we are bipedal walkers, meaning we walk on 2 legs, and thus any reproduction method had to work around a hip assembly that is frankly a disaster for giving birth. Thankfully, nature found a way by making every woman part Mr. Fantastic and giving them the ability to stretch to incredible proportions and then shrink back to normal size. However, this doesn't mean it's efficient, because human childbirth is hilariously inefficient and dangerous. For most of human history, it was basically a flip of the coin if either the baby or the mother would die in childbirth. The extremely awkward positioning required of the baby puts it at risk of strangling on the umbilical cord or injuring itself on the way out. Likewise, narrow human hips put the mother at extreme risk of injury and blood loss. Human civilization is built on a foundation of mothers who died bringing forth the next generation, and we should always remember that. Speaking of big heads, it turns out that your head isn't nearly big enough. Number 5. The human brain is incredible. It is faster and more capable than any supercomputer, and it runs off about 12 watts of power for an entire day. If we can make modern electronics that efficient, the world's carbon emissions would be a fraction of what they are, and big energy would be scrambling to generate more profit. When it comes to places to store that big old brain of ours, there's really not many good solutions. The chest cavity would have probably been a good choice, given the protection afforded by the ribs and the internal organs, cushioning against injury, but inevitably the head was the best choice. There is just one problem. It's actually a terrible choice. Have you ever had a splitting headache where it felt like your skull was about to burst apart? Well, that can actually happen, sort of. See, the skull is simply too small for our big brain, leaving us prone to catastrophic self-injury or even death when the brain undergoes any amount of swelling. Without any clearance room, the brain pushes against the sides of the skull and it exerts greater and greater amounts of pressure on itself. Without emergency surgery, the brain can actually squeeze so hard against the skull that it permanently injures itself, potentially even killing you. The entire housing structure isn't particularly well built either. The skull provides pretty strong protection against penetrative or slashing injuries, but it is absolutely terrible at protecting against the most common types of head injuries: blunt force trauma. In between the brain and the skull, there's a small layer of cerebrospinal fluid whose job it is to cushion the brain and protect it from bouncing off the skull. However, this layer is only a few millimeters thick, meaning it provides the most minimal protection possible against a head injury, as you probably know if you've ever fallen or got hit in the head. To make matters even worse, blood vessels pass through this space on their way to supply blood to the brain. This leaves them vulnerable to rupture, which suddenly pumps blood into an already too tight space, creating pressure on the brain. Riddled with design flaws, the brain probably would have been better protected somewhere else. But we're not done picking on the brain, because in many ways it was designed by amateurs. Number 4. We know this one might come out of left field after we praise the brain for energy efficiency, but the truth is the brain uses up entirely too much energy. Of all the energy you burn during the day, a whopping 20% of that is consumed by the brain. That would be like if New York City used up 20% of all the energy in the eastern seaboard. Someone would be looking at energy management. The more intelligent the animal, the more energy hungry the brain becomes. After all, that big old brain of yours has got a lot on its plate. Scrolling endlessly through social media, tuning out the latest Sigma male rant on YouTube, binge watching an entire show without moving, and texting sup to total strangers on Tinder. You are, without a doubt, a paragon of modern hyperintelligence, and all of that mental heavy lifting burns a lot of energy. Too much, really, because as powerful as the brain is, it's also extremely delicate. The brain is dependent on the steady flow of energy to the point of extreme vulnerability. Any stoppage in oxygen or glucose can have a severe impact on your brain, especially oxygen. How vulnerable is your greedy brain? Between 30 to 180 seconds without oxygen leads to unconsciousness, and that upper limit is for very special people in peak physical health. After just 60 seconds without its precious oxygen, brain cells are already dying, which is crazy. We'd expect the most important organ to put up more of a fight. In just 3 minutes, you've suffered so much damage to your neurons that brain damage is extremely likely to be permanent. After 5 minutes, you're probably gonna die. But if you somehow make it to 10 minutes, you're basically going to be stuck in a coma with severe brain damage. Compare all of that to about 20 minutes without oxygen for muscle cells to start dying off. All that means is that your brain is incredibly vulnerable to any sort of trauma, especially one that doesn't affect the brain itself directly. In many ways, the brain is less like a supercomputer and more like a Tesla, exploding into a raging inferno at the smallest accident. We're not done with the whole head area yet. Number 3. Let's talk ears, or more specifically, the tiny hair cells inside of them. And unlike the stubborn hair that keeps showing up in all the wrong places no matter how often you pluck it, the hair cells in your cochlea don't grow back. Once they're gone, they are gone for good, and so is your ability to hear. These special hair cells sense the vibrations caused by sound waves, and they send an electrical impulse to the auditory nerve. This nerve runs that signal directly into your brain's hearing section, where the signal is deciphered in real time and translated into the noise that you hear. That's right, you aren't actually hearing anything. Your brain is creating sounds based on how sound affects your inner ear hair cells, or stereocilia. The problem is that these cells eventually die off as you get older, with hearing loss typically starting around the 60s or 70s and getting progressively worse. But this isn't the only way the ear is sabotaged, because there's nerve cells inside the cochlea that act as the auditory pathway to the brain, and those too will diminish over time. There's no cure for age-related hearing loss, and even hearing implants may not work all that well. Though they amplify the sound, if you lose too many hair cells or nerve cells, there's simply no way of growing them back, and cranking up the volume isn't going to do you any good. So if you're the type that enjoys loud concerts, you should know that your hearing loss is far more likely to hit you sooner and be more severe, though generally about 18% of the global population will be affected. We hate to keep picking on the brain, but honestly, it is just the worst, and it has so many bugs that your entire reality is shaped by them. Number 2. What's the point of the brain, really? Well, some would say to think, and they would be wrong. The sole purpose of the brain is just to keep you alive, and in many ways it's actually really bad at that job. If we're going to be fair to the brain, as we discuss the fact that it is more buggy than the average beta app, then context is important. See, modern society is a pretty new invention evolutionarily speaking. For over 95% of human history, we didn't live in cities. We lived rural lives full of all kinds of natural dangers and predators. Thus, the brain was optimized by evolutionary pressures to operate best in this scenario. But that makes it very inflexible to changing times. The pace of human societal and technological development is vastly outpacing our ability to explore and keep up. We have more than any other generation before us. Well, except maybe the boomers, who did a good job of sucking the world dry. Yet, despite modern conveniences, mental illnesses such as depression are skyrocketing. The better life gets, the worse we seem to be at handling it. That's because the brain isn't optimized for a sedentary lifestyle. It was made to run away from predators, to punch cave bears in the face, and then to know which plants would heal you and which would send you on a 16-hour trip into the astral realm where you meet God face to face. The brain evolved for an active lifestyle full of danger, and by comparison, our modern living lacks the stimulation that the brain craves. That's why a growing number of scientists actually think that violent video games are good for us, rather than the age-old myth that they were turning everyone into psychopaths. The challenge in ever more realistic video games acts as an outlet for very primeval energies. But even with all that stimulation, the brain is surprisingly fragile and often downright weird. It's pretty easy for the brain to make errors, from chemical imbalances to injury to electromagnetic fields. It's a wonder that any of us actually function in modern society. But if you need proof of how much the brain sabotages you, consider that for most of human existence, we couldn't see the color blue. Not because it didn't exist, but because it was so rare in nature that we simply didn't recognize it. Ancient texts such as the Iliad often call the sky bronze and the ocean wine-colored or purple, and children who aren't exposed to the color blue simply don't see it until it's pointed out to them. So what could be staring you in the face right now that your brain completely ignores because it simply has no idea of it? Number 1. If you have to save an important file, you probably are saving it in 2 different locations. When you're designing an airplane, or a submarine, or any other complex machine, you double up on everything, because one failure shouldn't mean 100 funerals. Humans have known about redundancy since the dawn of engineering, and yet it appears evolution is perfectly happy rolling the dice with your personal health. Given how incredibly important to the brain, the heart, the liver, and other organs are, It's kind of impressive how there's absolutely zero redundancy built in. Most organs are one-trick ponies, meaning they do a very limited set of things and only those things. If your brain is damaged, your heart isn't going to start thinking for you as a backup. If your heart goes down, your lungs aren't going to take over. It's like someone slapped the human body together and then yelled YOLO as you try to survive for 70 to 80 years on very limited, incredibly fragile inventory. Suffer injury to one of those organs or lose it altogether, and it's a big dirt nap for you. Meanwhile, starfish and other animals can simply regrow damaged portions of their bodies. Our bodies might be full of design flaws, but that doesn't mean they're worthless. In fact, you might be surprised just how much value is packed into your imperfect frame. Watch How Much is an Entire Human Body Worth to find out, or click on this video instead.